Oh boy, I'm totally not Googling the countries that have the most wars with each other. Oh my dear. So yeah, Denmark and Sweden. Actually, that's what I think of both when I hear them together in a single sentence. But Denmark and Sweden are more than just historical rivals. In this video, we'll take a deeper look at their comparisons. Denmark and Sweden are located in Northern Europe, and they are usually referred to as Nordic countries. Despite not being in the Scandinavian peninsula, Denmark is actually considered a Scandinavian country for historical and cultural reasons. Of course, Sweden is in Scandinavia and is considered a Scandinavian country. When first looking at their maps, it's evident that Sweden is larger than Denmark proper. The reason I'm saying Denmark proper is that Greenland, a land that doesn't really look green and is also extremely massive, is part of the Danish realm. Denmark and Sweden do not share a direct land border, but Denmark's Zealand Island is very close to Sweden's Scania. But there are bridges connecting the two countries, the most notable being the
Øresund
Bridge. Geographically, Denmark is very flat. In fact, their highest point is
Møllehøj
with an elevation of just 171 meters, which means Denmark is not to go if you are looking for mountains. On the other hand, Sweden has lots of forests and mountains. In fact, almost 70% of Sweden's land area is covered in forest, and Sweden also has the Scandinavian mountains that extend into Norway. In terms of climate, Denmark has a milder climate than Sweden, although Denmark does seem to have a more identical climate to the southern part of Sweden. On the other hand, the northern part of Sweden is a lot colder. Denmark and Sweden are both countries under a parliamentary, constitutional monarchy. Of course, headed by a monarch. Both countries also have a very high standard of living, but they are also very expensive countries to live in. Regardless of politics, many people look up to their way of model for governance, known as the Nordic model. Their countries generally top the ranks in many metrics, such as the corruption index, press freedom, civil liberties, and GDP per capita. In fact, Denmark is considered to be the least corrupt country in the world, while Sweden is not far behind. Denmark and Sweden are part of the European Union, but they are not part of the Eurozone, so they don't use the euro. Denmark uses the Danish krone, while Sweden uses the Swedish krona, and they're actually quite different. Yes, Denmark has Lego, while Sweden has IKEA. Denmark generally has a small, open economy that is highly geared to trade with other countries. Their economy is based primarily on service industries, trade, and manufacturing. Sweden has a diverse and highly competitive economy, mainly based on exports and industry. In most military aspects, Sweden is generally ahead of Denmark, from fighter aircraft to military personnel. The Danish military is modest compared to Sweden, and it joined the NATO to bolster its security. Sweden boasts a relatively advanced military in terms of technological aspects. Of course, most of the people living in Denmark and Sweden are Danish and Swedish, respectively. But both countries have become a bit more multicultural, with the latter certainly having more non-Swedes, particularly migrants and refugees coming from the Middle East. This also led to an increase in Islam in Sweden, since both countries are predominantly Christian. There are more people in Sweden than in Denmark, but Denmark tends to have a greater population density. Stockholm and Copenhagen are just as equally charming cities. Danes tend to share more in common with the people living in the south of Sweden, especially around Scania. In fact,
Malmö,
is just a drive away from the Danish capital. When it comes to their traits, well, Danes and Swedes speak really good English. Danes generally tend to be more socially open and liberal, though Denmark is less tolerant of immigration than Sweden. Swedes tend to be more structured and professional, and they tend to have greater political correctness, as seen with their feminist and LGBT movements, although Denmark also has quite a lot of them, by the way. And yes, Greta Thunberg. However, when it comes to business, Danes tend to be more hierarchic, while Swedes tend to be more about reaching agreements. Denmark and Sweden speak Danish and Swedish, respectively, and they are generally considered to be mutually intelligible. They are all descended from Old Norse, the common ancestor of all North Germanic languages spoken today. And yeah, the common stereotype is that we associate both countries with Vikings. When it comes to food, Swedes love meatballs, while Danes love
stegt flæsk med persillesauce,
which is fried pork belly and generally served with potatoes and parsley sauce. They both love herring as well. Danes tend to have a higher consumption of alcohol, while it's slightly harder to drink alcohol in Sweden, nothing compared to Norway's regulations though. Both countries have rich music traditions, with Denmark having the renowned Carl Nielsen, but Sweden is more famous for ABBA and Sabaton. Sweden has this absolutely majestic painting that some bot on Facebook loves to post. And yes, they have Beauty Pie. Denmark is lit on science and philosophy, having Niels Bohr
Tycho Brahe, Hans Christian Ørsted,
and
Søren Kierkegaard.
Sweden also has renowned scientists such as Carl Linnaeus and Anders Celsius. Personally, I actually like their traditional costumes. When it comes to sports, well, Sweden loves ice hockey, while Denmark plays handball or badminton. But don't get me started about football, or as Americans call it, soccer. Their football rivalry is also tied to their historical rivalry. Speaking of historical rivalry, yes, Denmark and Sweden historically had some of the fiercest rivalries for the domination of Northern Europe. But at least for a while, they were both part of the same country, the Kalmar Union. Actually, Scania was part of Denmark, but it was lost to Sweden along with adjacent territory during the Second Northern War in 1658. Nevertheless, Denmark and Sweden are separate monarchies. It was Norway that was under a union with Denmark, and after the Napoleonic Wars, Norway came under a union with Sweden until its independence. Historically, both Denmark and Sweden loved waging wars, but after the Napoleonic Wars, Sweden followed a policy of neutrality that saw them avoid conflict throughout the 19th century. World War I, World War II, and the Cold War. On the other hand, Denmark became involved in the Schleswig War, and they even gained territory from Germany after World War I, despite being neutral. They were invaded by the Third Reich during World War II, and were occupied throughout the war. As mentioned, Denmark eventually joined NATO, but Sweden didn't, and it was not a consideration until very recently. One important observation is that Denmark is more connected to the affairs of Europe than Sweden due to geography. Denmark is directly connected to Germany, while Sweden sits entirely in the Scandinavian peninsula. This allows Sweden to avoid any threats from mainland European forces better than Denmark. Both Denmark and Sweden are active in the international community with Western-oriented foreign policies, although Sweden has historically been more neutral than Denmark. If you combine Sweden and Denmark, you form Sweden and Denmark. Their flags kinda look similar, but well, let's just take a look at Scania's flag. Denmark and Sweden actually tried colonizing, but for the latter, colonization is not their destiny. Meanwhile, Denmark has had quite a bit of overseas colonies, but they're now part of the Danish realm. Also, do not search for the translation of the number 97 in Danish and Sweden bowl, just says pork. In the end, despite many differences, Denmark and Sweden are considered close brothers that used to be the fiercest enemies. They like to poke fun at each other, and also at Norway and the rest of the Nordic family. If you're an outsider, you may think of Denmark and Sweden as very similar, but while similar in some aspects, Denmark and Sweden are unique Scandinavian nations. Thank you for watching and please subscribe for more country neighbors.